Hello and welcome to Smooth Musings, the podcast of Smooth Fusion. And today we've got an interesting topic for you, and I've got a great guest. I want to introduce everybody to Sam Basu. He works with Progress, the makers of Sitefinity. And Sam, tell us your official title and kind of what your role is there at Progress.
Yeah, sure. And first up, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. So I'm Sam, and I'm an old man. I've been doing this for quite some time, but officially I'm a developer advocate at Progress Software. I come from a long history of doing .NET development, so I work a lot with our engineering and PM teams in building products that customers build their products on. I've done a fair bit of web and desktop and mobile throughout my career, but here we are in a very evolved state where technology is here to make our lives easier, help customers build solutions easier. So that's who I am. I speak a lot, I write a lot, I work with customers, trying to make people more productive and successful with our stuff.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. And thank you for being here. This is a honor for us to get to have somebody that can give us the inside scoop for our audience here. And what we want to tackle today is really just we want to help, especially our marketers in our audience, that are hearing about ASP.NET Core and how their Sitefinity site is eventually going to need to be migrated to ASP.NET Core, and we know there's a lot of those folks that are hearing that and going, what does this even mean? What do I need to know? And what I think my goal for today is to help them understand that they do not need to understand at any technical depth what those things are, but we want to help them understand what it is and how we got here and what the history of it is. And so, and the fact that you're an old man helps because we're going to start back in the early days, right? And give some context for not just the evolution of Sitefinity, but the evolution of the web itself. And so, kind of curious, what was the very first platform or programming language that you learned as an old man?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I started with MS-DOS days, which was early 90s, but realistically, Windows 95 as an OS is where I started, early days of college and so on. Done some VB6 back in the days, which was a programming language meant for building, client and desktop style apps. And, the web was in its infancy, early days. I do have a good story since we're talking about, the evolution of the web. And again, like to your point, the end users, the IT folks, the marketing folks sometimes do not care, and they should not be caring about what the stack is. They care about their experience, and it is the evolution of the web that makes that experience better. Which is why the underlying stuff has to sometimes, shift a little bit. But I was at a conference years and years back in London where, amongst a lot of other speakers, there was Tim Berners-Lee, who is the founder of the web as we know it today. I think his title was like web developer. Like, could you have any more humility? Like, here's the person who discovered it. So, like, going all the way back, like 1989, I looked this up the other day. So Tim Berners-Lee was a British scientist working at CERN, a particle physics laboratory in Switzerland, I think. And he was trying to, work better, collaborate better with his co-workers who were on other parts of the country or, the continent, and which is why he came up with a way to share information easier. And that was the foundations of the web as we know it today, because that was HTTP, the protocol that we use to transfer information between multiple servers and clients and in between clients. So that's the foundation of where the web started back in the early 1990s, and then we have markup languages that, define how the web looks to the end user. Like when we look at things on a browser, the things that we see is markup with some styling to it. So there have been organizations who are in charge of, defining what that standard looks like. So it's called the Web Consortium, W3C, and they define the standards of HTML and, scripting and styling that go along with it. So it goes all the way back to the early 1990s.
Yeah, and that's a good setup for where I wanted to start, which is I also started building websites in the 90s, and it was really simple. I tell people that actually it's true. The very first website I ever built of any kind was for Microsoft. They asked me to build a website for them, and people are like, "Whoa!" And I'm like, "No, really, it was the dumbest little thing you ever saw." It was very, very basic back then because there really wasn't this concept of all this database and functionality in the back end. It was just you built pages and a server spit the pages out, and it had links to other pages, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
And in the 90s we started to see things that we called scripting, like Perl scripts that would give you little pieces of functionality that you could embed in your website. And so, those early days, I don't think anybody really had the vision for where it would end up, where you would have, people doing everything on the web, creating their documents, running spreadsheets, doing their banking, doing their accounting. That was not the vision yet at that point. And so in the late 90s, Microsoft, came up with what they called ASP, and we call Classic ASP today, which stood for Active Server Pages, which was just basically their web scripting language. And really that initial scripting language of ASP has just continually evolved into what we have today, which is enterprise level software, right? So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so all of this is kind of evolving in parallel. So we have, the world of, desktop operating systems, and then we have the web. So I think it was around 97, 98 is when Microsoft came out with, ASP Active Server Pages. And it was exactly what you described. You will have an HTML document sitting somewhere on a server, and in the past you would just deliver it to a client. There will be nothing else to it, no personalization, nothing else. But then we started injecting a little bit of scripting in our document, HTML document, that says if you happen to come back to the server, we can give you more functionality and we can give you more features from your website at that point of time. And that was the beginning of what you described as Classic ASP. It had a good run for 5-6 years, I think. But the trouble for folks in the back end, like the developers in the house, was it meant a lot of spaghetti code. Essentially, is how we used to call it. So the markup, which is the HTML document that the end user sees, is kind of mixed up with some server-side functionality. You click a button and it comes back to the server, and you spits something else out. So it was fine for the end user, but it was kind of very difficult to write and maintain as developers because it was all together in one spot. So we would like to have more separation of concerns, and we have learned this as we went along. To build complex enterprise systems, we need to have things with separate set of responsibilities, so we understand how to test things and so on. So Classic ASP had it, ran its course for 5-6 years up until we see like 2001 2002 timeframe. Mm-hmm. That was the beginning, and also in the meantime, Microsoft is trying to evolve its desktop story. We have Windows 95, Windows 98, we have had VB6 and a few other ways to build classic desktop apps. But 2002 is the first time we see them trying to bring it together. So we have .NET, getting born at that time. There was a .NET framework which evolved a lot over the last, the next 15 years. But that was the first time we see .NET as a foundational framework that runs on top of Windows, and it helps developers build stuff out. So we can abstract some things out. We don't need to care about very low level file system access. The programming languages that we use to build our apps get better. They start getting object oriented. We start having more language features. But that was all to build Windows desktop apps. So VB6 essentially graduated to be VB.NET, and it's a very, very productive environment. We used to call it WinForms. So you might see the similarity: WinForms for desktop and WebForms for web. So WinForms was very productive. So essentially, developers had a canvas where we are looking at a screen that the end user will eventually look at, and we are dragging things on screen like UI elements, buttons, drop downs, grids, charts, whatever you name it. And then all of that lives on that screen, and the user gets to interact with it. And the code that fires when the user does something on screen is also right next to the screen as well. We used to call it code behind. So WinForms and all of that is getting developed as Microsoft is growing their Windows business. But along comes Web Forms, which is the first evolution of Classic ASP, like you said. Now it is ASP.NET. And it's called Web Forms because they want to make things easier for the developer. So if you already know how to build desktop applications, the web should not be any different. You will still have a canvas, a screen where you're going to drag and drop things. And when the user clicks on something, you come back to the server, and that has added functionality. And Web Forms started back in 2002, and it's still going strong, some might say, because it is very productive. It is a wonderful place for users to quickly spin something up if you're a developer. But I think the downside was it was hiding the realities of what the web was meant to be with HTML and JavaScript and CSS. Like, you didn't see a lot of that in Web Forms. And then, they learned doing more evolved things with Web Forms, but that's kind of where it started.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good background. And I think now is maybe a good time to just stop. I don't want to assume anything, and just to help people understand, as a piece of software, what is a CMS like Sitefinity? What is it doing in the background? Because, we see it, the user just sees pages. They have no idea what created those pages. What is the piece of software that we know as Sitefinity exactly?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good segue. So, as we use modern web apps, some apps are kind of standalone. Let's say your banking app or your airline app. So those are standalone apps because they don't generate new content every day. So you have a site where you go and do some stuff, and then you're done and you're out of it. Like, nobody else is touching it. So that's fine for a developer or a team of developers to build that one time and have users experience that over and over again. But what if your web application was trying to, it's more of a platform for you to deliver content. So let's just say we have blog posts, we have new campaigns and new advertisements and other things coming into. So you come to a site today versus tomorrow, you're going to see different types of content. It's not just the same experience. So now content is becoming more of a king because you want a platform that helps you showcase that content. And when you have content as the main thing that you're delivering through your app, you quickly realize that your traditional ways of delivering a web app are not enough, because now you have to go tap into the developer team or the designer team to produce every piece of content, and that's just not scalable. So now we have a mechanism where you could have a pipeline which knows how to handle more and more content, as much content as you can give it, because now you have a database and other things in the back end which are all standardized, and the developers and the designers or anybody else can be hands off. It's a platform for you to deliver content and customize it for however it is that you need. So no two users of your site might have the same experience. It's a platform for you to generate and showcase more content. So content management system exactly is what it is. It's a way for anybody in the organization to create content, and they don't need to be technical. They can just create content, and the web application should be flexible enough so it's, you don't need technical knowledge to create content, and then content lives in a fixed way in a database or in the cloud, and that's just surfaced through that app.
Yeah, and so obviously that's a very much more complex piece of back-end software than the old days when we had pages with scripts embedded, right? So there's a lot going on. A lot of things are database driven. And of course, a lot of things are integrated with these sites as well. Typically, other systems get integrated. So you end up with a complex piece of software that has, it needs to be high performance. It's got to work fast. It's got to do its thing. And so as the complexity of these things grows, it's important for that back-end software to be built on the newest, most high-performance technologies, right? And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
Microsoft had this thing called web forms, and in about 2005, some folks in Bulgaria created what they called Sitefinity, and they chose the Microsoft platform for the stack to create this CMS on. And obviously at that time, web forms was what it was created on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so for a long time, and there's still sites today running on web forms.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we still make UI for web forms, and it's still running fine. It's productive. But like to your point, a system like a CMS, we only talked about the content piece, but you mentioned integration. It is so much more than just content management. You might be running your entire e-commerce on that side. You might, be running things on the cloud. You might have APIs that feed into other systems. So this is a complex piece of software. And it needs to be running on the latest and greatest runtimes to get every ounce of that performance out, so it can be fast, and you can leverage things for multiple purposes. But to your point, like Progress Software today, it's a huge software company. We have a big portfolio of products, but if you look at small pockets of where things started, it was a couple of guys who came out to MIT for their college, went back to Sofia, Bulgaria, which is a beautiful city, and started some of the UI tools that we call Telerik or Kenda UI, and Sitefinity as a CMS. And to your point, web forms was the thing to do in those days. There were some other competing frameworks like Ruby on Rails, or from the Java world, they were still trying to figure out web. But this was the most compelling story, especially .NET. The way it was evolving and Microsoft's investments in it, they were all in, and it was very productive, to be honest. So that was the way to start. In fact, they started the experiments with Sitefinity actually back in Classic ASP, before ASP.NET was a thing. But web forms is really when it kicked in. So Sitefinity has a long history of web forms. But come maybe 2008, 2009, there were rumblings inside of Microsoft that web forms, as productive as it is, maybe needed to evolve, because it was not running web apps the way it was supposed to be in how other folks were doing it. This concept of hiding HTML and CSS and JavaScript, everything was XML back then, and SOAP services. Why hide the complexity? Why not let developers build it with all complexity, and they get to pick and choose their stack? So it's little less hand-holding, little more more of mature platform which lets you build other things. So which is when this whole idea of MVC, we see that come into life. MVC stands for Model View Controller, and again, the end user, to your point, they don't care at all like what this is built in. It's for us to maintain it, but at the same time, the end user needs to know why we need to evolve certain things, because we want performance, because we want flexibility in how our web applications work and integrate with other systems. So MVC was a design pattern, and it got adopted, and there were lots of fighting in-house as to which one should win. So the decision was let both of them flourish. So web forms continue to be productive and still is, but the MVC side of the family comes along and says, here's how we build modern web applications. It is a little bit more complex from the get-go. It's not as point and click as we were used to in web forms, but it is very flexible, and it's how modern applications that run on a server should be architected. So it's a design pattern that we are adhering to, and it brings in more openness so people can write libraries that work with your software. And we see that maybe early 2008-ish, and MVC also had a very good run for about 7-8 years up until the mid 2015s.
Yeah, and so obviously Sitefinity followed suit and adopted MVC, started that migration somewhere around 2014. Is when you could start to work with MVC within the Sitefinity platform, and then 2016 comes around, and Microsoft starts rolling out what they call ASP.NET Core.
That's right.
And so again, another evolution. How would you, in as simplest terms possible, I guess, kind of summarize what's the advancement between MVC and ASP.NET Core?
Yeah, now that is more of a tectonic shift, because that has more to do with .NET as a whole than just ASP.NET. So the shift from web forms to MVC was honestly not such a huge deal, because the runtime on which your applications are running, that is still .NET Framework, as we used to call it. So Microsoft from the get-go was wanting to be very open that people should be able to run web forms and MVC side by side within the same app, within the same project. And that wasn't too much of a breaking change, because you could coexist. And you might say like ASP.NET Core nowadays also coexists with other things, but right around the mid 2015s, we see also kind of a big shift in the way Microsoft writes .NET as a foundational framework. So starting from 2002 up until maybe 2016, .NET is very much tied to Windows. It is a framework that runs on top of Windows, actually ships with Windows. If you go buy your new PC, you got .NET already pre-installed. And that's where it started, but it started becoming a huge monolithic thing, because every team added more things into it to a point where it just became a beast. And you might hear old school horror stories from IT departments at your company where they had a whole process to upgrade .NET framework from 4 to 4.5. It was a big deal because it was so much a part of the OS itself, and it was gigantic, and so many apps depended on it. So the realization was this is getting too big, and it's getting too ugly to maintain and justify. So why not split things up a little bit more? And also, this is the point we also see the world kind of evolving to open source software. A lot of web frameworks that are open source, much more easier to collaborate on. So Microsoft makes the decision that we need to break up .NET as it is right now, make it open source, make it not as monolithic but much more modular, and make it cross-platform. So this is the first time .NET steps out of just Windows, and now .NET runs on Linux and Mac OS. For all 5 people who want to run Linux as a desktop, more power to you. Now you can run .NET. So that's a big shift, because now .NET is evolved, and modern .NET has come such a long way. It's just a folder. Here we started with .NET being a part of Windows to being a folder, and you can blow it away. You can package .NET with your apps if you wanted to. So it is really very, very low footprint. It abstracts only the things that you need from the OS and no more, and then lets Linux and Mac OS do their thing. So that's a huge tectonic shift in how .NET evolved. And along with it, ASP.NET had to evolve, because now ASP.NET is running on .NET. So instead of .NET Framework, now it's running on modern .NET, which is that whole cross-platform modular open source thing. So now it has to pick and choose a little bit of the parts of .NET that it needs to not bloat up your app. So only give your app the things that you absolutely need and no more. Along with it comes a new engine on how we render things on the UI for the end user. So things are much more faster. Performance is big, and there are always competing frameworks, which is good. Competition keeps us, on our toes. So Microsoft is trying to fight all of these competition and trying to squeeze out every bit of performance. And .NET Core and ASP.NET Core is really, really performant, which is why we, mid 2016 onwards, we see a big shift to ASP.NET Core. And nowadays, when you talk about, .NET, you don't talk about all of these details anymore. .NET Framework still exists as a part of Windows, but nowadays we just say .NET because it's, .NET 6 is when this thing started, but now it's .NET 7 or 8 or 9. Developers don't care anymore. It's just .NET, and they know that they have only the pieces that they need from that framework on whichever platform they're running it on. So ASP.NET Core is also another shift. So for us, Sitefinity, and trying to maintain a CMS for end users, we have had to rediscover how it functions several times over, and that's the nature of technology. We have to evolve with the times, because if you don't, then you get stuck in your comfort zone and you're not running with the times. You are risking security, you are risking productivity, and speed and performance of how your users see your apps running on a CMS. So we have to evolve, and modern Sitefinity now runs on ASP.NET Core, which is where you kind of started the conversation. So backwards compatibility is very, very important. We have to understand that when enterprises pick up a CMS and they build their apps and their websites and their content on it, that's a lot of investment, and for it to move and shift and lift doesn't happen overnight. It's a lot of work. Right. So Microsoft and partners like us, we are always trying to make sure that we can try to coexist as much as we can with the old, but we have to embrace the new.
Yeah, and like I say, a good point to make sure to point out here is Microsoft is no longer actively developing MVC. They've moved on. And like I say, from security concerns and things like that, you've got to you want to be where the development is still active, right? So just in summary here, we've got ASP.NET Core is where Sitefinity's heading. We'll talk a little bit about the good news of migration options here in a little bit, but version 15.x is going to be the end of MVC support for Sitefinity as well, and so but there's lots of time to address that, and we'll come back to that in a second. But what I wanted to spend and we hit some of these topics, but as somebody thinks about having to move to ASP.NET Core with their Sitefinity site over the coming years, let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits and enhancements that they're going to see from that. We've mentioned performance. That's obviously a big one. What are some other advantages to being on the ASP.NET Core version of Sitefinity?
Yeah, sure. So ASP.NET Core does open things up a lot more. Since it is modular, since it is cross-platform, it opens up your hosting. So you could run those same applications. A lot of companies love having huge Linux servers. You could run them off that very, very easily. If you look at modern times and how we run apps in containers or in the cloud, all of that opens up because now you're not so tied to Windows Server. You don't have to have IIS running on a Windows Server that is serving up your application. So immediately hosting becomes much easier. And if you want to split things up in like microservices and do all types of modern architectures, everything becomes much more open and flexible. So that's one. Now performance, you mentioned, that is not a given thing because they have done benchmarks on how it is. If you just have a standard database that's serving up some content, they have figured out that ASP.NET Core is to the magnitudes faster in delivering content as an API to any type of app compared to any other framework. So Node.js or any other struts or any other frameworks that you have, it is really, really fast. And the end user benefits from that speed, as in how quickly their page loads, how quickly their content loads. All of that is very, very streamlined. And security, things are isolated nicely in a sandbox, so you are kind of protected against some of the bad actors. But also, as we make the transition over to ASP.NET Core, and we are still coexisting with MVC and other things as well, it's also important to keep in mind that every change is an opportunity to make things better. So if we take the time to re-architect how we do things, we can position ourselves to be more future-facing. So in modern Sitefinity, you see a lot of decoupled architectures. So as a CMS, you have a backend, which is the functionality that powers how your admin users interact with your site and how they're setting up pages and views and widgets for your other users. How are they seeing a list of all the pages and how they work with those? How are they managing news and blogs? So that is the back end. But then you have the front end, which is often what the end user sees. And maybe they're not technical. They just want to come in and create a new piece of content and get out. That front end is now completely decoupled from the back end. So if you have developers in the house who would like to build that front end in React, or Angular or Blazor, you can do that because it's all API driven. We are sending REST. REST is another design pattern. It's because the web from the fundamental, like this was the challenge with the web forms days. The web is fundamentally stateless. We don't want to hold a lot of state on the server because that means bloat, and that means the server cannot be as fast as it can. So we want as much stateless as we can. So it is completely decoupled in a way that the backend of Sitefinity can run on ASP.NET Core, hosted on Linux or Windows or Mac OS. But the front end can be anything that your developers want to do. APIs are super fast, and now if you want to lift and shift into some of the modern cloud models, if you can think of PaaS, platform as a service or software as a service, it comes down to if you are trying to run a small business, like I have a small ice cream shop that I'm wanting to get my website up, I shouldn't have to go through all these hoops. I can just say, I don't care where you host it, just get it going. So that's where some of the cloud infrastructure comes in, and we can move and shift things pretty easily and decide exactly which parts of Sitefinity do you want to be concerned with and so on. So it's more flexibility overall.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that our team reports, our developers, is first of all they like working in .NET Core more. But the time it takes them to develop is quicker, right? And that eventually translates into better costs for the marketers because you're paying for less time for those developers to get work done. The page building experience itself is more intuitive. People enjoy that more, and so we're finding a lot of advantages that on top of the fact that in the back end things are much improved. And we talk about performance a lot, but we remind people all the time is performance is so highly tied to SEO and those kind of issues as well, because you will get dinged by Google if your site loads too slow, these kind of things. And so all these are good. So let's talk a little bit about the migration to .NET Core. Obviously, marketers, our customers don't necessarily love the news that things need to be rebuilt. But there's some good news there, right? So talk to us a little bit about what are my options in getting my site migrated to where eventually I'll be off of MVC and web forms and all that.
Right, and this is something to your point. It's never maybe an easy news to convey, and but maybe we should also state that if folks are running their apps on web forms or MVC, it's not going away anywhere. .NET Framework is a part of Windows for forever, so you will be able to run your apps forever, except you're not benefiting from all of the investments in the last 10-15 years to be this modern cross-platform foundational framework that is .NET today. So Microsoft and us, we are very careful in how we roll out. Like, we have to move things forward for the benefits, obviously, but we have to be careful as to how we do it, not to disrupt anybody's business. So just like the way we had it from web forms to MVC, this is also an opportunity for us to coexist a little bit. So we have customers on MVC and we have customers on ASP.NET Core. If you are building a greenfield, brand new app on Sitefinity, by all means, go ASP.NET Core. You have no baggage. But if you do have investments in MVC, and you folks are actually, Todd, very good at doing this, you can actually have things coexist. So the runtimes are a little different. MVC runs on .NET Framework, while ASP.NET Core runs on .NET Core. The runtimes are different, but you can mix and match. You can have a site, kind of a tree map where some pages are MVC, and some pages are ASP.NET Core, and in that way you're taking a bite-sized approach to modernization and migration. And when we talk to customers, sometimes it's not the easy conversation to have, but you have to show ROI. The fact that your developers and your end users are going to be that much more productive with the performance. You're working in an ecosystem which is very, very open, so you benefit from all types of open source libraries. You want to do logging your own way. You want to handle emails your own way. By all means, bring it all in. Your integration stories are that much better, and you open it up to much more of a flexible hosting model, be it on premises, be it in the cloud. So yes, you have to kind of show the ROI that here's what you gain by coming from MVC or hopping from MVC to ASP.NET Core, but you don't have to do it all in once. You can coexist.
Yeah, and so we were the first Sitefinity partner to migrate our own site to ASP.NET Core, and we started that way back in 2021. And yeah, we did that very thing. We had initially some of our core pages, our primary pages, we rebuilt on ASP.NET Core, and then over time we took care of the rest, and it was a good way to handle that migration. And one of the things that our customers have to keep in mind is the large investment that they have in loading up that Sitefinity database with their data, their blog posts, their all the things, and they may have 1,000 pages in their site, and so the idea of of changing platforms completely or starting completely over is a very large project that would impact their budget and their timelines and everything. So the ability to do this in a migration the way you just described is very valuable to our customers, so that they can make a plan and do that. One other thing I was just thinking about as you were talking, the original founders of Sitefinity that selected the Microsoft stack way back in the day, turns out that was a good choice, right? Because this is, it's really emerged as the platform of choice for enterprise development, and they're probably glad they didn't do it on Ruby back then. So yeah, it's been a great. It turns out it was a good choice.
It really was. And again, if you look at modern .NET as a stack and how we build apps on it, it is very inviting. We want to be including everybody. If you want to do JavaScript as your front-end stack, by all means, go do it. And you mentioned how companies have years worth of investments in the content, and hopefully with modern abstractions, we can kind of segment out the content, so we can still talk to your old content from a very modern framework, because the content is living in a database, and we can have entity framework and a few layers of abstraction to pull it still into a newer application stack. But also, modern .NET and ASP.NET in particular, it's also very open to working with any other application stacks. And you look at your workflows of how you might have maybe designers in the house, right? So they might want to do some design systems, and you want to layer and style your pages and your widgets in a certain way. All of that is much more flexible and open these days compared to MVC, because we can isolate just the part of the web app that you want to style, and then have kind of a master style that applies to everything through colors and through accessibility. So all of that are benefits that you're getting by jumping onto a more modern, more open cross-platform, foundational framework. But again, to your point, it's not an easy thing to understand, but or maybe to accept that you have to do. But make a plan. If you are on MVC today, your house is not up on fire, so you have some time.
That's right.
It's just you need to realize that technology moves on, and you have to evolve with the technology to keep your apps safe, as well as have your app developers and folks you create content, your authors, have the best possible experience. So you sometimes need to move the underlying frameworks.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to the last thing I want to talk about in the last couple of minutes here is here at Smooth Fusion, we have developed some specific resources to help in this process. We offer what we call an ASP.NET Core migration readiness multi-point assessment. It's a really long name. But basically where we come in and assess your site, make sure it's code ready and all for a migration. Then we offer what we call creating an ASP.NET Core Sitefinity roadmap. And so where we sit down with you, look at the roadmap ahead in the time we have to make this migration. We look at your budget cycles, your needs, the things you'd love to change, the pain points you have of your current site, and we create a plan for how to do that. And then that rolls into what we call the migration project plan, which is then we boil that down into an actual plan that's ready for implementation. And then finally, we even have a starter package that we have put together that helps us get you ready to start building on the ASP.NET Core, building pages on that even sooner. And so we've got some well thought through best practices here, obviously from our own experience working with it on our own site and helping customers make that migration. And we've built sites from scratch on ASP.NET Core as well. And so we'd love to help anybody out there who's just ready to start a conversation about what's best for my site. Because, there could be situations where your site was, maybe implemented in such a way that starting over really might be your best deal. But we find that we can avoid that in most cases for sure. So Sam, this has been great. Your input's been awesome, and we appreciate you taking some time to share all this with our people today.
No, absolutely. And we are so glad that you do what you do, because nobody should be struggling by themselves. There is a lot of help. There is documentation. There is tooling that tries to help. But again, like Todd said, based on how you have maybe built up your app, it might be a tricky migration. So talk to people like Todd and Smooth Fusion who know how to do it. You have the experience, because a lot of times it's the experience of seeing different clients do different things that can opens your mind to say, oh, this is maybe a better way of migrating things over. But while it's not always the easiest conversation or trying to understand why something that is running fine needs to be upgraded, it is because it can be so much better. And the end user maybe doesn't care as much about the technology stack, but they can benefit from the performance. They can benefit from the flexibility that a modern CMS running on the latest web application development stacks brings to the table. So hopefully you all have I want to say like a magic wand that you swing around and it migrates, but it's talk to folks like Todd who know what they're doing.
Yeah, and even for folks who have their own dev teams internally, we are happy to come alongside those dev teams to help them get started and let them know those best practices and things they need to be watching out for as they tackle it themselves. So great. This has been great. I hope for those of you listening, I hope this was helpful in helping you kind of get an understanding of what's going on and what your options are and what the advantages are of seizing this opportunity. So Sam, thanks again. And for the rest of you, we encourage you to share this podcast with others, subscribe, and keep listening because we'll keep cranking them out. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Smooth Musings. If you liked today's episode, make sure to subscribe, share it with someone, and rate us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. This podcast is presented by Smooth Fusion. If you'd like more information about Smooth Fusion and how we help our customers with websites, custom software, and more, go to www.smoothfusion.com.